afternoon. Hello, College 100. My name is Claire, and I'm a current senior in communication major, and I'm also part of the core intern team, and I get to be your moderator today. Before we dig into the panel, I'm going to tell you a little bit about CORE, which is the Communication Department's new internship program. This internship is an opportunity for professional development while working on campus with our own department. This is a paid internship, and we'll be looking to hire new folks in the fall, so be on the lookout. Our focus is on creating content, outreach, recruitment, and relationship building, and supporting engagement efforts for the communication department, as well as the alumni and student communities we serve. This internship offers hands-on professional growth for students seeking to gain and enhance their experience as communication professionals while supporting the mission of the department. Some examples of projects we are working on include social media engagement, graphic design, video production, and event planning. Today, I would also like to tell you about the Comm Department's Career Kickstart program. Career Kickstart is exactly as it sounds. It's an opportunity for students to prepare for what happens next after graduation. And it's a way for these fine folks on stage, who will introduce themselves in just a moment, to stay connected. But it doesn't stop here. The department also offers other resources for professional development, including opportunities for students to visit with alumni locally in Seattle, as well as even going to LA and New York for career exploration trips, as well as mentorship program and more to help students put their best foot forward. We encourage you to follow at u.com on Instagram and Twitter to stay up to date with upcoming events and workshops. With that being said, it's my pleasure to welcome our esteemed panelists. We have Kathleen Miller, Director of Marketing and Communication at Friends of Youth, Suna Gural, Senior Digital Director at Wake Communications, and Dan Album, author of Impact Makers and Director of Marketing at Committee for Children. I'm excited to hand the floor over to you guys. Welcome, panelists. We'll begin with your introductions. If you guys could tell us a little bit about yourself, your career pathway, and how you got to where you are today.
Okay, I'll go first. I'm not going to do that.
Can you hear me in the back?
Yeah.
Great. I hate microphones. I'm a print journalist by training.
We needed this for recording purposes.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm using the mic.
Sorry. Here we go.
Okay, so one of the things you learn when you are a communications major at the UW is to assess your audience so that you can tailor your content, right? So I'd like to know by show of hands, how many of you are freshmen? How many of you are sophomores? How many of you are juniors and seniors? Great. How many of you are definitely planning to major in communications? Good, that's good to know. How many of you think you're going to be journalists? How many of you are writing for the Daily? Okay, look around the room. Raise your hands higher. I wrote for the Daily too. Those are the two people that are going to be journalists. So if you haven't gone into the Daily yet, because it's kind of a circus and you're a little intimidated, if you think you want to be a journalist, that's where you need to be. So I'd really like you to try spring quarter to get in the Daily, or fall quarter. You'll never regret it. I am a graduate of both the communications program and the Foster School of Business. Is anybody else here a double major? Great, you guys are going to get great jobs too. Congratulations. I graduated back when dinosaurs roamed the quad. When I worked at the Daily, I typed my stories on this thing called a typewriter. And then I would roll my copy up after my copy editor worked with it and stuck it in a vacuum tube. It would go downstairs in the basement and it would be typeset. And if I did a really good job on my story, they'd let me go downstairs and watch them put the metal type into the slots. That's why it's called leading. There you go. When I graduated in 1987, I moved to Detroit, and I began my career in Entertainment Publications, which is a large coupon company. They make the old entertainment books. That was a great job. I had really mean editors. I learned how to proofread really, really well. And I appreciated the mentoring that I received and the training I received. And one of the through lines of why I've had the career I've had is because I'm really, really good at proofreading to this day. I went from there, I returned to the Northwest. I got a job doing marketing for a nonprofit, and then I worked for a technical college for a while, and then I got a really great job at GE. At GE, I was a copywriter and a project manager, and then I ended up at the very end managing internal communications. That was a great job until GE decided to move all our jobs to Virginia. And I said, no, thank you. And then I jumped out of full-time work for 20 years while I was raising my 3 kids, who are now all college age. So I had my own marketing company, and I was a freelance writer, and I wrote for Seattle Magazine and Parent Math and Future Sun Business Journal. I got to meet J.P. Patches, who's one of my childhood heroes. I did not recognize him because he didn't have makeup on. So he came up to me, and I kind of looked at this strange man looking at me, and he opened his mouth, and I thought, oh my God, it's J.P. Patches. And that was really super fun. I got to travel and write travel stories. I had a great time. And then about 3 years ago, I jumped back into full-time work because 3 kids in college. So I worked for an organization called One Redmond, and now I'm at Friends of Youth as the Director of Marketing and Communications. You can draw a line from the daily to where I am now, because at the daily I learned to tell compelling stories. At the daily I learned to meet a deadline. At the daily I learned how you get subjects to tell you things that maybe they don't want to tell you initially. So I hope all of you that are sitting here today, I hope you take advantage of intern programs. I hope those of you that are a little scared about walking into the daily, that you summon your courage and apply for one of those writer jobs. Take advantage of all the opportunities that are given to you while you are here. And I also appreciate you being here today because I know you're going into finals, and I have never been so tired in my life than when I was here at the UW Finals Week. So thanks for being here.
That's a high act to follow. I was not planning on walking, but I will. Hi everyone, I'm Suna Carroll. I'm the Senior Digital Director at We Communications, which is also known as Wagner Edstrom for older people around here. And my route is a little more circuitous, but there is a red thread that I was stitching together in my mind as I came over here. So I graduated with a liberal arts degree. In my school, we didn't even have a communications department. I was an English major and bopped around a lot, trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life, and almost went to law school, moonwalked my way out of that one, and ended up working for doing tech, believe it or not, at a telecommunications firm, aka Adult Entertainment at the time. And it was a really random job, but I also realized, and the only reason why I did tech is because I'm not afraid of tech. So the time that my dad was an engineer, was like, hey, you want a computer? You gotta build it. I was like, okay, I guess I will, yeah, what the heck. So never been afraid of it. So got a job doing like tech at this like random firm because a friend of mine was working there. And I ended up hanging out with all of the web designers because they were the cool people. And when I left there, I did like a web intensive and really said, you know, this is where I kind of want to go. And it was kind of more of a burgeoning area at the time. Worked as a web producer at a stock photography agency now owned by Getty Images. And then ended up working at Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, which is a fairly large nonprofit here in Seattle, for about 11 years. And that is where I learned, like, okay, this is not only what I want to do, but this is the area that I really want to focus into. I started the social media there at Fred Hutch, which was very frightening to a very conservative risk-averse industry. Anyone who's worked in nonprofits know that. And that was sort of my focus for a long time. And then I started working, I went to graduate school here while I was at Fred Hutch at the Comm Lead department. Some of you may have heard, have heard about it. And at the same time, and that was really my intro into really communications as an industry. Worked at Fred Hutch for 11 years and then decided to get out of nonprofit work and worked as a senior program manager at Microsoft for several years. Moved on from there, and that's when I ended up realizing that I missed actually owning something. And so when I was at Fred Hutch, I owned the digital communications there, and that's what I'm doing right now at We, which is a PR and marketing firm here in the Seattle area. It's a global firm, but with a purpose focus. So I own the digital communications at We, and that's not my red thread of like, oh, okay, English major through working, being okay with tech and being comfortable with tech, realizing that tech and communications are together, and that means, website and social and intranets and anything that deals with how you communicate electronically or digitally. So I guess that's my story. We'll keep going.
Good job.
Hello.
Really professional.
It's really a special privilege to come back and be able to connect with you today. I was walking through the campus a little earlier, and it struck me, in some ways, 4 decades takes a long time to play out, but in other ways it goes by in an instant. And I was just reflecting on the Dan that was sitting in your seat coming into King Hall 4 years ago and going through the School of Communications, and what would the Dan now, 4 decades later, tell the Dan 4 decades ago. So it's an interesting thing that I was thinking about. But my story, a graduate of the School of Communications, my passion, my focus was in broadcast journalism. And my typewriter actually was even older than Kathleen's, so I graduated in '84, so those typewriters were a little bit older, but I remember pounding away. And went out. I want to ask a question. Have any of you heard of Durant, Oklahoma? Have any of you been there? Have you heard of Durant, Oklahoma? I didn't think so. I hadn't either when I got the job offer to take an entry-level position at an AM/FM radio station. So my initial work coming out of school was going into media and working in radio. And I'll tell you, there's no better crash course in really understanding radio than just coming into a small market station where you're asked to literally do everything. And by everything, I mean news broadcasts, sports broadcasts, take care of the automated FM station overnight, creative shifts. So pretty much doing everything. We did that for a year. And then I made a very big personal decision to go in a little bit of a different direction. I've always had a passion for connecting with people, for helping people, for bringing creativity into relevance of messaging. And I decided to actually translate that communications background, shift that more into a business focus. So I went back to further my education, got my MBA at the University of Texas in Austin, and from there really launched a marketing career, working for several global companies, first in consumer packaged goods, General Mills, Cadbury, Schweppes, then moved over into the technology space in wireless. So it was there at the beginning of the real massive growth of the wireless space, ultimately working for Verizon Wireless as part of the founding of that entity, which is still active and growing today. And then ventured into other technology companies, Cisco, worked there for several years in the unified communications space, all that IP telephony and technology today that you take for granted on your phones, all of that functionality and versatility is part of that, of leveraging the power of the network. And then went and worked at Honeywell for a couple of years, and then ventured into the fitness space and led a global marketing team at Precor, which is now part of Peloton in the fitness space. And then in the last couple of years, co-founded a marketing consultancy, Market Impact. We're helping companies around the world translate marketing strategies to support their growth. I've also founded a podcast to share leadership best practices. It's called Market Impact Insights. You can go check that out if you're interested in that. And then more recently authored a book called The Impact Makers, which really takes my experience and all the learnings from my career, coupled with some of the best of those conversations in the podcast around exceptional leadership. So it's kind of come full circle, but as we get into the conversation, you'll see that there's a lot that I took from my experience here at the School of Communications that has translated and really been a powerful foundation for me to be able to do what I've been able to do. So I'm really excited for the conversation today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing your backgrounds. I'm really excited to hear more from your unique perspectives. I have 3 questions prepared, and then we can do a time check and open it up to the students. We can go in the same order as before for this first question, which is, what are some things you learned during your time at UW Communication, and what are some things you only discovered once you entered the industry?
So I think one of the most valuable things was working at the Daily and learning how to make a deadline, write engaging stories, how to get subjects to tell you things that they didn't necessarily want to tell you. But there were a lot of things I learned once I started my career that I didn't know when I was here. For example, just so you know, salary is a negotiation. I didn't know that until I got to GE. How sad is that? I also learned that your boss, your immediate manager, can make or break you at a job. And the organization you work for, again, can make or break your career. So one of the things I'm really going to encourage all of you today, if you haven't already, is to start your profiles on LinkedIn. And you can start by connecting to all of us. Because before you go out there and get a job, you're going to be smarter than I was at your age, and you're going to research all the organizations that you're interested in joining. Because some of them have very toxic cultures, and there's no amount of money they can pay you that will compensate for you working 7 days a week. I know what I'm talking about because at the end of my time at GE, I was literally sleeping in the reception rooms of printing plants because we had such huge deadlines and challenges to overcome. So I hope that you will all be smarter than I was, make better choices. I will also tell you that office politics will have a big impact on your careers as well. So finding mentors early in your careers, especially if you're women, especially if you are a person of color, especially if you are LGBTQ2I, is really critical. Because there are still things going on in the workplace all the time, that having a mentor and knowing how to navigate that, especially someone who truly understands the challenges that you are facing, is really helpful. So those are some things I learned on the job and some of the things I took away from here.
I concur completely with you on your points there. The thing I learned most at UW Com Lead was that writing really matters, and being a bad writer won't get you anywhere, especially in comms. And so I worked at the, I wasn't at the Daily, but we had our own online blog that was actually really good because there were all these ex-journalists who had come into Com Lead to changing their career. So there were all these awesome writers and editors, and that certainly upped my game. I was kind of going into like, how do you business work? And I'm like, no, there are actually people who know how to write. I'm like, okay. And that's really, that makes a huge difference is that. The other thing I learned at ComLead was to be entrepreneurial, see opportunities. If there's an opportunity that presents itself, just take it. Volunteer, go into it. I learned so much, just being, I'll learn about digital signage. You would not believe what an interesting project that ended up being. And it never would have, I would have been like, okay, I guess someone else could do that. But it's really, really interesting trying to figure out how to make something work so that people can understand it and be moved by it. In terms of learning what to do after you're in college and what you learn, agree is like with what Kathleen was saying, is finding mentors, making those connections, having those relationships. Relationship building is really great. Do a great job in your day-to-day, but having a good relationship with your boss or with your colleagues is really incredibly key in terms of your success. And that also goes into volunteering. That also said, and like raising your hand when the project comes. The only other thing I would say is don't get pigeonholed, right? If you're the one who's like, sure, I know how to do the thing, suddenly you're the only one who can do the thing, and that's all you might end up doing. So really, like I said, look for opportunities. Don't get pigeonholed into like, I'm the only one who writes the communications for the office birthdays. And then all of a sudden you're the only one who handles the birthdays. And then you're the woman who does the birthdays. And that, far be it for me for someone who wants to do that, but maybe you don't. Maybe you want to be able to do some other things. So keep your eye out for opportunities and volunteer for them.
Yeah, so for me, I think back to what did I take out of the School of Communications, and there are many things that really made a difference. One of them, and this even in the roots of broadcast journalism, when you're thinking about the story, right? And we talked about crafting a story that really grabs an audience, but you really got to think about what and who is that audience, right? And really a deep understanding of audience. And I can say that the discipline of really being able to think about that and really visualize. We used to talk about an audience of one, because when you're communicating on mass media, you're communicating to many people, it can be overwhelming and it almost becomes generic. Who is this audience? And so one of the exercises was to close your eyes, sit back, think about, picture anyone that you are communicating and talking to that makes it more relatable, and really developing more of this personal connection, even though you may be communicating in a mass channel. So that was certainly something that even as I came and have gone through my business success up to, and even with the work that we're doing globally at Committee for Children around social emotional learning programs in the education space, there, and just with all of the disruption that has happened in the last couple of years, taking the time to really understand who our audience is, what their needs and their problems are, there's a real strong parallel to crafting the story, even back to my journalistic days, of something that'll be relevant and really be meaningful, to someone. So that's one thing that I took away from that. I think the second thing, we've talked about it a couple times, is taking advantage of the opportunities that existed to get hands-on, real-world experience, get out of the theoretical and into real world. So internships, I think there's another question, we'll share a little bit more about that. That was certainly something I jumped into because, for a practical reason, which is this really something I want to do for a career? I think it's something I want to do, but we all know the reality can be very different. Our perception of what the reality of the day-to-day grind is, and that is different. And so that's a great test to go in. If you haven't, I would just say do anything you can, part-time or a formal internship program, really see what it's all about. In terms of some lessons learned, I'm just going to make it more at a personal level. We're even going back in time, but taking it forward to today, we're in a real technology world. The news and information access is moving 1,000 miles an hour. People are making fast decisions. Our patience levels are just a whole nother level. We sometimes feel the pressure. We've got to keep moving. We've got to make those fast decisions. And for me, looking back on it, I wish I would have actually stayed within the journalism field a bit longer. I think I was a little impatient. I don't regret the career path I've had. Has been amazingly fruitful, successful, made a lot of impact and difference in the world. But I think for me, just looking back, being honest, to say I think based on just the pressures of the moment, I didn't stick with my passion. I didn't hold my ground. I kind of exited maybe a little fast. So I would just encourage you, if this is your passion, don't walk away from that prematurely. You're going to have a lot of voices that are maybe telling you should go in a different direction. It's your life. commit to it, follow your heart and follow your passion. That would be a learning that I would take from that.
Great, thank you. Piggybacking off of what you just said, Dan, I wonder if you can answer this first question, or this next question first. What are some of the mistakes you made during your first few years in working in the field of communication?
Yeah, I think one of the, looking back on it, you know, as someone coming out, fresh out of school, making the decision to move a couple thousand miles away to a place that I'd never heard of, an entirely different world, and really working professionally full-time for the first time, you know, out of college, is, you know, the confidence, the self-confidence. There's some of that was developed in the program here, and when you're in broadcasting, you know, you have to communicate effectively. It really helps you have the energy and you communicate with confidence. But I didn't have the confidence in terms of some of the interpersonal relationships and the dynamics. I think we heard a little bit about that, you know, sharing before too. And that's a little different. The human relationship outside of just the process of communicating through media, very different. And so for me, it was going in and figuring out, how do I navigate through this? And there are people that are communicating in a very different style than I'm accustomed to. I'm not sure, are we really on the same frequency, to use a radio analogy? And there was some learning. There were some bumps in the road. It took me some time early in my career to really get that confidence to be more assertive, to really have a voice at the table. And I would just encourage you again, is you have a right and you earn, if you're in that room, to express your voice, to express yourself, and to make an impact. And I learned that the hard way early by not being as assertive as I could be, but it's all part of the process, but you have the opportunity to hopefully do that very early in your careers.
That's a great point, for sure. I mean, I can think back of like a variety of places which can connect exactly to what you're saying. I think similarly, I think one of the things that has been, when I think back at that time and when I graduated from college and then when I graduated from Colleen, some of the areas of learning, one of which is that, where I made the biggest mistakes is when I was rushing. And every time my biggest error came from me going, I'll just send those right before lunch, right? And I haven't really thought it through or reread that email another time or even once. And that's where like monstrous errors came from when I wasn't when I wasn't being thoughtful with small things. So I would, in this world, as you mentioned, everything's going so fast, and that is absolutely our world, and it's your world for sure. You're on the phone constantly and communicating with each other constantly. That is absolutely, in a business capacity, doing something that you can't take back is something that is harder to overcome. So reading that email a second time, it sounds so dumb, but it's totally true. Reading that email a second time, reading that social media post a second time, anything that you can't pull back from is worth it. Because if you make that error, it can be just like a colossal mess up. So I have stories. I don't know if we want to go into those, but that's like a minor thing, but it's a huge thing.
I would say especially for all of you when you are, for example, sending cover letters and resumes for internships or jobs, please, please, please prove your work. I have been hiring student interns now for several years, and I'm always so sad when I have to hire a Bellevue College student over a UW student because, of course, I'm biased. I want to hire all of you. But for whatever reason, the last year, I get cover letters and resumes from you guys, and you're not using this thing called editor because there's a blatant typo in a cover letter for an internship for communications. So I just want to beg all of you, because I want you all to have amazing opportunities. This piece of advice that you just received is actually critical to your careers. So when you're applying for internships, when you're applying for jobs, go through the exercises carefully. Take your time. Know that for some of you, you might have to take a proofreading test. For others, you might have to take a programming test. My husband's with a technology firm, and all of his entry-level candidates take a programming test, and a lot of them fail. So do your homework, and part of this too is you connecting to mentors and using your professional network. We're Huskies, we don't pull the sled by ourselves. So go out there and utilize each other, avoid those toxic workplaces. So some of the mistakes I made is a colossal one. When I was at the Daily, I was handed the magazine internship at Alaska Airlines magazine. That was basically just handed from writer to writer to writer at the Daily. And I was so excited to get this opportunity because that was really my dream job. Unfortunately, I was first generation college student. I didn't have a lot of mentors, and I really didn't know anybody that worked at a magazine. So my friend Brad handed me this opportunity. I went to go interview. I was tired, like the rest of you. I was dressed casually because some weeks my fiance and I didn't have enough money to both go to the laundromat and get gas to the car so we could go to work. And it was probably one of those weeks where we didn't go to the laundromat. I walked in, I sat down, so eager. They literally asked me 2 questions. Thank you very much, bye. And I left, and I was crushed. And I realized a few years later, it's because of the way I was dressed. They took one look at me. I didn't dress like any of the other women that were working that day. And they did not want to see my portfolio or hear about my work or what I could contribute, which is one of the reasons why I started college to career programs here at the UW in the department, because I never wanted the rest of you to be crushed like I was that day. So that was one of the major mistakes I made, but that's one that you're not going to repeat. Thank you.
Hiring managers are judgy people, so keep that in mind. Your clients are going to be looking at everything that you send.
Totally, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and for your advice. The final question, maybe we can begin with you, Kathleen. Were you part of any extracurriculars that helped further your career?
That's a great question. So obviously I have an intense love for the Daily. It was a bit of a pirate ship when I worked there. There was hardly any women actually at the Daily at that time, and there was only one woman editor, and that was the copy editor. My friend, the late Byron Monroe, was the first Black editor of the Daily. He went on to become the editor of Ebony, and he is a member of the Hall of Fame. So it was a really amazing time to be there. It is still one of the best places on campus to get training if you are thinking you're going to do any kind of content work. So I know it's intimidating to take that first step and apply and write your first article, but you can do this. You really can. Other things I did while I was here is we actually had a yearbook very briefly at the UW, and I was an editor for that, and that was fantastic. I worked a lot. As I mentioned, I was the first generation UW student here. So I worked, for example, in food services in McMahon, which was awful, but I learned a lot about customer service. I worked retail every single weekend, and again, I learned a lot about customer service. So if you have not actually worked an actual job with a bad boss, if you arrived here and you were playing select sports and you were president of your class and you had all these amazing volunteer activities, yay you. But before you graduate, please get a job, any job, where you're getting paid, where you have a bad boss, where you have to do 5 things at once, which anybody who's worked at McDonald's knows you do, because people do look at that. They do want to hire you for your technical skills, and some of you will slide right in because you know how to code for a website or you're great at social media, and I hope that's all of you. But some of you will not easily find a job. So please, while you're here, take advantage of your internship, go write for the Daily, and get a job, even if it's just 8 hours a week. Because trust me, this is going to help you when you graduate.
I agree completely. And I think I mentioned year as a grad student, so it's a little different than undergrad where you're doing all sorts of super fun stuff that you guys are doing right now. As a grad student, you're like super targeted. I will get my graduate degree. And so the one thing that we did have, as I mentioned, was this fairly high functioning, fairly good blog at the time with a whole series of writers and editors, and I was on the editorial team for a few years there when I was at Conley, and that was extremely helpful, as I mentioned, in terms of like, you can't just like poop out an article, you actually have to do it and do it well, and then you're gonna get feedback back. And I would agree that having a job of some sort, if you can, and taking advantage of anything that shows up, like those great internships in Spain, if you can swing that would be fun. Doing anything along those lines is really helpful for your career, for your, and actually here in school, in your school. The other thing I didn't mention, and I'll just take it like real quick pass on this, is that in business, it's really hard, especially when you're right now, it's really going to be hard when you move into business is not to take things personally. And I think you mentioned that. It's like all of us come out of, we graduate, we go to our first job, and you were mentioning you're ready, I'm here, and then like, oh, and it's really, really hard not to be crushed in work. And I'm still struggling with that, and to not take things personally. If you can master that, you'll be a success wherever. If you just like focus on what you need and what you want to do, and then not take it personally when somebody says, not quite, it's good but not, or no, and be able to pivot. And I can't, that's a learned program, but I do suggest that that's something to try to do when you feel rejected. It's like, I won't take this personally, but I will try to find another way to make this happen, or I will pivot.
So I also had the opportunity to write for that wonderful publication known as The Daily as a writer, and I think what was really, really neat about it was just there was some freedom to go and develop new story ideas. And it's amazing if you just, sometimes in the most unlikely places, there are these human interest, incredible stories. So I would just encourage you, for those of you that are out seeking and really want to develop the craft, especially around from a journalistic standpoint, of be very open, and it's amazing what you will find out there in terms of being able to generate that. Also, we talked a lot about internships. Internship at Como Television made a big difference for me, and working around really experienced journalists. Connie Thompson was a great mentor to kind of see and be around her. Of course, she worked in this market for decades. And that was really amazing. But I would just say this, that now reflecting back, that taking a chance, and you probably heard the term, be comfortable with the uncomfortable, get uncomfortable. Because your career, looking back now, I think for all of us, we can say that there are going to be unanticipated situations and experiences that we cannot predict, we cannot forecast, and so build up that confidence and that skill at being, and that's how where growth comes, and that's where continuous learning comes. And so if there's one thing that you take away, you don't remember anything else that Dan said here today, is commit to being a continuous learner. And that doesn't mean just through the academic side of it, it means in your life in terms of the people that you reach out and establish connections with, being open to new and different, diverse ideas, to an environment of innovation, and you'll find that it's amazing, and you'll get so much out of that. So continuous learning, commit to it, and for me, just with the nonprofit work that I'm doing now, that was a big leap for me, because working for-profit technology companies for so long, it's about shareholder value. When you translate that to, say, late in your career, when you can shift over and think about multi-generational impact through mission, and you open yourself up for that, for me, it's been transformational. So keep an open mind, commit to continuous learning. Thank you.
Definitely a growth mindset is very important. Thank you.